gorgeous girls. Today I've got a slightly different video because a lot of you have asked me to give you some tips about traveling to Japan. So I thought I would do just that, give you 10 practical tips if you are planning to travel to Japan. Now usually when I decide to travel somewhere, I do a lot of research and planning and organizing. That's how I like to do it, like that. When I get to a destination, I know a lot about the place and the things that we can do, and from there we can decide what we feel like doing. Unfortunately, this time, because of the wedding and everything, I didn't have any time whatsoever to plan the trip. So basically I left it all in the hands of my travel agency. So that's the first thing I want to talk about, whether to do a package holiday versus your own planned trip. Usually when I travel to very far away destinations, I like to go on a package holiday because the travel agency will make sure to send you to the blessed place, will basically be responsible of your well-being. So if something goes wrong, you can give them a call, you can blame them, so there's something you can do about it. Whereas if you do it all yourself and you make a mistake, basically it's your own fault and there isn't much you can do about it. In the case of Japan, package holidays are actually pretty expensive, but I do have to say that usually with a package holiday you do know what your final cost will be, because basically that's all you're going to spend. Then maybe some food and souvenirs, but that basically is the main cost of the trip. On the other hand, when you plan your own holiday, in the case of Japan, it can be cheaper because in fact, hotels, they can be cheaper than the ones that are offered to you at the travel agency, and you can find cheaper flights maybe sometimes, and you can buy a pass to use the train, and it actually doesn't work out too badly. Unfortunately, the problem with traveling by yourself and organizing it all is that sometimes in the end you spend a lot more money than you expected, because it's very difficult to plan ahead what costs you may have once you're there. So make sure you think about it carefully. I've done both types of holidays to lots of different destinations, and I usually spend a lot more money when I plan it myself, although I do whatever I want, but it is usually more expensive. My second tip is to make sure that you have a guided tour. Obviously, if you go in a package holiday, this will probably be included, so you will have your own guide. But if you go by yourself, make sure that at the destinations, at the different places that you go to, you go on some sort of guided tour, because like that, you will really get to know what you're looking at, and you won't just be wandering around the monuments, not knowing anything about them. We bumped into quite a few people who were traveling solo, and they were so completely lost. They didn't know where to go, they didn't know what to see, and they were wasting their time a lot. If you don't have much time, a guided tour will make sure to show you the things that are really worth seeing, and they will explain really well all the history about it and all the small little things. We were lucky enough to see 2 geishas and 2 maikos because our guide told us exactly where we had to be and at what time if we wanted to see them. So we were incredibly lucky, whereas other people spent most of the day there trying to catch a glimpse, and they weren't able to because they didn't have that inside information. My third tip is to combine cultural visits, shopping, and also historical and monumental visits. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you what things to visit because this is a very personal choice. Some people love to go to many history museums and spend a long time, whereas other people just want to go shopping and buy loads of souvenirs. But when you visit a country like Japan, which has such a different culture, I do recommend doing all sorts of things. So going to visit some well-known monuments, also doing some shopping and buying souvenirs, and also making sure that you do some things which are a little more traditionally Japanese and things like that, like going to see sumo or some traditional performances or things like that. My fourth tip has to do with where the hotel is located. If you are planning your own holiday, try to make sure that the hotel is in a good location so that you can actually walk to some of the places that you want to visit, or it's near an underground so that you can actually go there quickly. We were lucky enough that the package holiday had very well situated hotels, so from where we were, we could basically visit all the places we were interested in, so it was actually really, really great. It has to do with language, and I have to say that I'm afraid that they don't speak English very well, generally. And not even at touristy places, I found that most of the time they had no idea what I was talking about. My tip is to learn a few words in Japanese because they really, really appreciate it. So things like hello, goodbye, thank you, and a few things like that. And what I do have to say is that they are incredibly, incredibly nice, and they really do try to help you. So even though they don't understand you very well, they will go out of their way to try and help you. Another tip is that they do understand written English, so you can actually write a few things. So try to speak really simply. So instead of saying, oh, excuse me, could you tell me the way to the museum, please? You can say museum, where, or point at a map. That is usually better, and they will really help you because they are so, so nice and helpful. My next tip is to eat at local restaurants or cafes. Before I went to Japan, I was really worried that it would be extremely expensive. I mean, I've been to Norway and eating there is just ridiculous. But in fact, in Japan, I didn't think it was that expensive if you stick to Japanese things. Because if you decide to go to Italian restaurants or American restaurants or things like that, for them that's more like a specialist luxury restaurant, so it will be more expensive. On the other hand, if you stick to their own sort of teppanyaki restaurants, sushi bars and things like that, it actually isn't expensive whatsoever. We were eating basically most of the time for around 18 to 20 pounds for the both of us, which I think is very well priced. My next tip is to really choose well the time of year you decide to visit Japan. We went in July because we got married the 2nd of July and we wanted to go on our honeymoon right after the wedding. But it's probably not the best season to visit Japan because it was incredibly hot and humid, and obviously we didn't get to see the sakura flowering trees. On the other hand, it was very beautiful, the weather was lovely, and there are obviously advantages and disadvantages traveling at different seasons during the year. So try to see which is the best season for you to go. Some will be more expensive, some will be cheaper, and obviously at some times of the year will be really hot or really cold. So take that into consideration. My next tip is to try out traditionally Japanese things to do. And I sort of mentioned this before, but I'm going to get into detail. And Japan has a very different culture from our European or American culture. And I think it is sort of westernizing, which I think is a real shame. So I do really think it's worth trying out things which are typically Japanese and that are very different from our Western way of doing things. So make sure that you go to, for example, a karaoke, or go to a cat cafe or a maid cafe, or even to the type of places where they usually go to experience that sort of difference in culture. Obviously being very respectful, but really just living that culture, going to an onsen, one of the Japanese spas, all that sort of thing, and really, really enjoying it, because that's one of the things that really makes Japan very special. Now, my last two tips have to do with shopping, and first I'm going to talk about souvenirs that you can take. I really recommend you buy things like Japanese snacks because they are really, really different from European ones, and they really make a fun thing to give your family and friends. Sometimes you won't even know what you're giving them, but it definitely is a real laugh, and it really will be a hit with your family and friends. Another thing that makes a good gift obviously are things like chopsticks and things which are handmade, wooden articles, all that sort of thing. And even you can even buy kimonos and stuff like that, because it's very Japanese. You can buy it quite cheaply at certain market stalls, and it's something that people will love. And finally, my last tip is about shopping for oneself, apart from souvenirs. And first off, I wanted to say that most things are more expensive in Japan due to the high cost of the yen and also import taxes and all of that. So if you want to buy something of a well-known brand that you can get in Europe or America, it's usually more expensive in Japan. Nevertheless, there are things that are worth checking out in Japan. First off is beauty and cosmetics. They are obsessed and they have so many different brands and they are amazing quality. So if you're into beauty, and I imagine you are because you're following me on my beauty channel, make sure that you have a look because they've got such an amazing variety of products. Obviously, another thing to look into is everything related to manga, video games, and all that sort of stuff, because they've got just so much to choose from, little figurines, comics. Amazing, absolutely amazing. If you're into that, they've got lots to choose from. And finally, I wanted to talk about secondhand luxury. The Japanese are obsessed with their luxury items. I have never seen so much luxury in my life, and they like to resell, to buy other things. So there is a very healthy secondhand luxury market, and because they are so strict against copies, you can be sure that you will buy a real secondhand luxury item. And if you don't mind it not being that new, well, it could be a good opportunity. So those have been my 10 tips if you are planning a trip to Japan. I hope you have enjoyed this. I didn't really want to get into very specific details because it really depends on you and what you want to see in Japan, how long you've got and all that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Press thumbs up and comment down below if you've been to Japan or you have some extra tips for the rest of the people to see, and also for me in case I ever go again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye! NC20, and I like it because it doesn't crease and it doesn't enhance any fine lines, and it lasts a long time. It's great. The only problem is that it isn't very high coverage, so